Are there ways to safely release rage without it harming anyone? I certainly hope so, because I am a rage-fueled person. I am very fueled by rage and spite, and I rely on them to drive me and empower me in a lot of what I do. So I would certainly hope that there are ways to release that rage without it harming someone else. This was a question sent in to Ask a Witch. Ask a Witch videos are always answered from the instructor's perspective. So as a reminder, this is going to be what works for me. That does not necessarily mean that it will work for you. For example, in this case, I don't ever attempt to fully eradicate my rage. I want it. I want to keep it. So it is not my intention to release it and then not have it again. It is my intention to release it from a chokehold that it might have on my actions or on my thoughts or on my physical, emotional, and mental well-being. I want it to back off or be focused in specific directions, to use it to motivate certain activities. I do not want it making it impossible for me to sleep. So the full question is, are there any ways to safely release rage without it harming someone, like a spell or ritual to express my anger and let it out so I can focus on other things? Yes, I would say that there are and that I rely on them. So let's get into the methodologies that I have found effective for myself, and hopefully something in there will assist you. So to start with, this is not your question. You asked about spells or rituals, but I want to be completely upfront that I've been through anger management therapy. It was very, very helpful to me. So as a teenager, I got into several physical altercations with other students. And in order to not be sent to something called opportunity school, there was a series of things that had to happen, including mandatory anger management therapy. I did actually find it very, very useful. I will say that for something like anger management therapy, one, you need a good therapist, someone who is not going to treat anger as an emotion that you shouldn't have, especially I am AFAB. There are some people who just treat anger as an emotion that I'm not allowed to have, and somehow for cis men, anger has been branded not an emotion. But I didn't have that kind of therapist. I had a very validating therapist who very much respected the reasons why I was angry, and didn't dismiss them, and didn't treat anger as if it was a bad thing. In fact, I think that my therapist was so helpful because they treated anger and rage as very valid emotions that I needed to find healthy ways of expressing, rather than something that I should deny or dismiss or be ashamed of. So that was very helpful. 2, there is a certain kind of clergy-based counseling, pastoral counseling, that often influences anger management techniques for AFAB people, especially in certain regions of the United States. I worked for a church from the age of 11 to 18 in childcare, and some of the children and some of the mothers going through divorce care, which was essentially a Christian extremist fundamentalist methodology of interfering in families that were being divorced in order to prevent the divorce, often by convincing the wife to put up with infidelity, abuse, unequal share of labor, sexual misconduct from her husband, all kinds of awfulness. If you ever wonder why I have a really negative perspective on certain extremist forms of Christianity, well, I saw it up close, and I saw its effect on the children who were being watched over while their parents were going through this divorce counseling, and oftentimes being given counseling themselves. And the young girls who were going through this counseling were being given this biblical model of biblical women to ascribe to be like, and some of what they were supposed to focus on was always being completely forgiving, calm, sweet, compassionate people who were never angry, and who never made anyone else angry at them. And if they did make them angry, it was supposed to be about pacifying them, and they were never supposed to respond with anger themselves. I took some classes at this church at the instruction and insistence of one of my uncles. One of these days, I will answer a question I have been sent at Ask a Witch so many times, which was, why did you decide to become a witch? This is actually part of that journey. But one of my uncles insisted that I go to these classes on how to be a good biblical woman. And there were other girls in these classes, and they very much focused on, you're not ever allowed to be angry. You must always be sweet and loyal and compassionate and kind. And no matter what anyone else does to you, you can never respond to it in kind. And you must submit and you must obey. I had a really, really hard time with it. And long story short, don't do that kind of anger management. It is my personal opinion that it is extremely damaging. 3, don't do the kind of anger management that you find in the spiritual bypassing New Age community, which is all about, it's based in this idea around the secret, and it says, you know, whatever you send out, you will receive. Whatever you manifest into the universe with your emotions, that's what will come back on you. I have so many issues with this entire branch of spirituality, starting with the spiritual bypassing and, you know, culminating in the racism and sexism and gender essentialism and everything else. But in particular, if you're looking for rituals or magic to help you with your anger and you Google that, a lot of what comes up is from this extreme New Age perspective about always releasing your anger and not letting it come back to you, and flooding yourself with positivity and forgiveness. And nope, I'm not about that. So if that's what you're looking for, this is the wrong place to get it. So my first bit of advice is seek therapy, but not like that, okay? Find a good therapist, not based in that Christian version and not based in that New Age version. Okay, that was a lot. Second, not every way that you express or release your anger has to be magical. And in fact, for me, a lot of what I do on the daily to manage my anger isn't necessarily magical. I will note that a lot of my life, I've woven magic into it in other ways, like small ways. So saying there's never any magic in it isn't really accurate. But one, I have a punching bag. When I want to punch things, I go punch the hell out of my punching bag. I have both a standing bag and we recently purchased a heavy bag that we're just trying to get hung so that I'll have that as well. And I practice martial arts. One of the things that I do in martial arts is sword training that you do, and stick training that you do, and knife fighting training that you do with a shadow opponent, which is basically where you envision the person and you just do the drills over and over and over again, sweeping through their shadow. And I'll just do that a lot, and punch the bag until I'm exhausted, and do my sword drills or my stick drills or my knife drills until I'm exhausted. And it helps a lot. It was actually one of the things suggested by my mental health professional who was helping me with anger management therapy. Basically, I told him, like, you don't understand. I sometimes just want to pummel someone. I just want to hit them over and over and over and over again. He was like, so get a punching bag. Hit something that you're allowed to punch. And it's worked really well for me. And then since then, we've had family therapists also suggest it for a teenager who's struggling with anger issues. And it works for the teenager as well. So highly recommend getting some method of exhausting it physically. Just keep in mind that anger is a physiological force, and sometimes you need to release it in a physical way. And we don't want to hurt someone unintentionally, who we don't have a very good reason to hurt. I'm not a pacifist. A punching bag is a great way to do that. I like it a lot better than some of the other methods I've been told by not my, Hey, there's a very large beetle on my ceiling and a cat that is trying very, very hard to get to it. That'll be fun. I'm so scared that's gonna drop on my head. I'm not scared of the beetle exactly, it's the unexpected beetle in the hair that I'm a little concerned about. And that's the sound of the cat climbing on the wardrobe. So, I don't really like screaming into a pillow. It's just never worked for me. I don't know what it is about it. I've tried the flinging myself dramatically onto my bed and screaming into a pillow to express my rage, and I just feel silly, and it doesn't help. So, I use a punching bag. Okay. But you specifically asked about magic and ritual. One, I do meditate a lot. Like, a lot. No, I am not telling people that exercising, drinking plenty of water, and meditating is a substitute for therapy or mental health medications. I am saying that it has helped me significantly. I have dysautonomia. I have a very, very, very hard time being accurately medicated, safely medicated for any of my depression, anxiety, CPTSD, etc. So I meditate a lot, and it works for me. And I often meditate on, this is why I'm so angry, this is the source of it, where can I direct it so that it is a driving force, a light on this path, something that fuels me rather than something that burns me up. How do I use it to move me forward rather than stick me in place suffering? And I find paths forward where it can direct me. How do I meditate? I'd be happy to do some basic meditation videos talking about what I do and don't do and what has worked for me, but meditation is a highly specific thing. What works for one person will absolutely not work for another. We've talked about there being essentially 5 different ways that people do magic. What if you're aphantasic? You don't have the ability to visualize. Well, then visualization-based meditation is not going to work for you. Or what if you're a really, really emotive person, but if you try to do emotive style meditation, and then the anger gets so ramped up, you can't actually meditate on the source of it, which is an issue I have. I do very emotional meditations. So if I'm meditating on my rage, it can just bubble up and feel like there's too much. So with magic, one of the ways that I express my rage and anger with magic is by throwing an internal temper tantrum. I use a lot of methodologies that involve building an inner landscape, and being able to express myself in my inner landscape. And because I've spent a lot of time exploring it and building it and getting it to be a big part of how I interact with the world, I often have stuff going on in there even when I'm doing everyday things. Now, anyone can do this, regardless of their training. It's the same way that you have a grocery list pulled up in the back of your mind, and you can then move it to the forefront and then slide it back. Or you have a task list. These are the things that I need to do, and you slide it forward and slide it back. Maybe you literally see it, maybe you don't. Maybe it's an auditory thing, maybe it's a mental list that you know, but you couldn't actually visualize it being written out on paper or hear someone say it aloud. Everyone has a different way that their brain works. I have a very, I can build an apple in my brain. I can see it, I can pick it up and rotate it, I can remember what an apple feels like, the weight of it in my hand, the waxiness of the skin. I can smell it, I can taste it, I can build an apple in my head. I'm aware not everyone can do this. I can also be inside my head and have conversations with other versions of myself. This is very handy for me. Sometimes we need to have a discussion about things. But sometimes what's happening is that I am throwing an absolute rager of a temper tantrum behind my eyeballs. It's going on in there somewhere while I am remaining very calm and very steady. I throw these temper tantrums fairly often. And in my head, I scream and shout all the things I'm not letting myself scream and shout. I pound my fists, I throw things, I behave very poorly inside. And then once I've let that pass, I'm able to continue. You could debate whether this is a magical technique. It is for me, because this is one of my foundational techniques that I use in magic all the time, is to build things in my inner landscape and then bring them out into the world. This is where I do a lot of my spell weavings. I do spell weavings where there's physical objects I'm tying it onto, but there's always this internal component as well. Another way that I express my rage and my anger magically is by using it as a building block in my magical workings. So I use a methodology in magic that we've talked about a lot in our Patreon Practical Magic course, where there are collective ideas about things. So what everyone ever around the world thought and felt and believed about certain things, I tap into that and I find the portion of that belief that aligns with what I'm trying to do, and then I build using it. I literally build some of my magical workings out of my rage and out of the rage of others. One of the protective spells that I have going all the time on everyone I love is built from anger and rage, specifically protective anger and rage, because I encourage you to remember that rage and anger have different forms. There is rage and anger based in grief. There is rage and anger based in betrayal. There's rage and anger based in love, and wanting to keep something safe. So one of my major protective spells is literally built out of it, and it gives me a means of both tapping into this emotion in others and understanding that I'm not so alone, and also directing it and using it and expressing it and feeling as if I did something useful with it. So that's one of the ways that I use it magically. I also use it as just straight up fuel. I will use the fact that I am angry about something, that I'm filled with rage about something, and I will go channel that directly as the emotional, magical fuel. Not just the torch that is lighting the fire, but the fuel that the fire is burning to fuel the magical working. I do that a lot. I also keep a well of my rage and anger and spite just sort of simmering all the time that then I tap into for magic. Now, I don't have as many occasions to tap into it aggressively as I used to when I used to go do spirit cleansings and exorcisms and that kind of magic. I'm not really doing that as much anymore. And not that I don't do it at all anymore. Primarily I consult now, and I have an ongoing, I'm teaching a student how to take care of harmful and malicious magical entities in private sessions, and I intend to eventually turn that into a course that we teach on Sanctum Seminary so that other people can learn to go do this themselves, because I'm mostly retired, mostly. I'm not sure anymore. It's complicated. Okay. In terms of ritual, I also work with some deities that are specifically aligned with rage. There are deities that are aligned with rage on behalf of certain groups of people. So there are entities, for example, that are the rage of AFAB people who've been abused or sexually assaulted or murdered. And I work with those entities. And the fact that I feel that rage helps me work with them to do some of the spells and etc. that I'm building. So lots of ways that I work with my anger and rage. But I never try to eradicate it. I always try to keep it as part of me, that's fueling my drive to keep moving forward and keep doing the work that I do. Which brings me to my last point, which I don't think is necessarily personally applicable to you, but it's still important to me. One of the reasons that I'm working for Sanctum, that I'm the director and one of the instructors of Sanctum, is because I'm so angry. I looked around at certain aspects of the world that I lived in, and they made me really, really, really pissed off. And I decided to do something about it. Now, originally we had a physical location that was a community center and a store on top of the place where we provided educational services and services for things like banishing and exorcism. It is my hope to maybe potentially reopen a physical location at some point. But for now, all of the classes that we're teaching are partially because I am so pissed off. So in terms of expressing the anger and the rage in a way that is magical, I founded a magical seminary. I'm the director of a magical seminary. I teach for a magical seminary because I was angry. So that's where that anger is going. I would say in order for that to be applicable to you, find something healthy that you want to use your anger to build. Say that you look around you and you go, oh, I'm so angry. I don't know what to do with all this anger. Find something productive to do with it. Maybe you could join a local nonprofit's volunteer staff. Now I'm aware that everyone's spoon level varies, everyone's resources varies. I don't know how much extra time any given person has, how much extra money, how many, mana slots they have open, I think is one of the ways I've seen this expressed. I probably got that wrong. But find something within what you have to give where there's a cause that aligns with what you're angry about, and put that anger towards motivating you to do something. Not necessarily a magical thing to do with it, but mine happened to align with magic. All right. This got a little long, I'm sorry. If anyone would like me to go in deeper depth on anything I mentioned, how I do it, etc., let me know. If people are interested on picking back up on the patreon.com practical magic course where I go really in depth on any given technique, I'm happy to do that. We just need to get enough people signing up and interested. It was really, really popular during the pandemic. We had like a lot of people sign up and we did weekly practical magic classes. But now it's just a playlist that people on Patreon gain access to because as people went back to everyday life once the pandemic was over, I'm saying it like the pandemic's over. It's not over, but you know what I mean. Everything kind of opened back up and people were being social again. The interest waned. If people would like us to pick that back up, I'm happy to go more in depth on any given technique if we get enough people signed up. Right. Please send us questions for Ask a Witch. You can drop them in the comments below. You can email them to us at staff@sanctumofthecraft.org. Again, that's staff@sanctumofthecraft.org. Or you can join our Discord and drop them there. As a reminder, we have multiple courses going on right now at Sanctum Seminary, including the second year of the Witch's Poisons in Depth, the Mastery of the Tarot, and the Death Ritual and Death Magic course that goes on, which you can sign up for any of our courses at sanctumofthecraft.org. Again, that's sanctumofthecraft.org. Thank you all for your time, and I hope that wherever you are, you're safe, and that you remember that anger is actually a perfectly normal part of the human spectrum of emotions.